I'm Patrick Howell O'Neill with CyberScoop. I'm here at CyberTalks in Washington, D.C. I'm with Gus Hunt, the Federal Cyber Lead for Accenture. And Gus, your role means that your day-to-day is dealing in this city, in Washington, D.C., with the federal government, which gives you a pretty unique perspective, I would say, on a pretty important part of the cybersecurity puzzle. So what I would ask is, in terms of the organizations, the agencies you're dealing with, what are the ways that they need to change the way, fundamentally, that they think about cybersecurity?
So I would say that it's pretty clear today, just given the pace of cyber events, the fact that we have a whole bunch of problems, that we need to approach cyber from a different perspective. And this is one of the things that we started talking about, which we call the cyber moonshot, which is really for us to find a way to come together more effectively, set a big, hairy, audacious goal, and really look at driving to a solution that engages everybody across the board. And I think that's the single most important thing we can accomplish, which is to set a set of objectives that brings together the federal government coherently, brings private sector together coherently, academia, excites the passion of young minds, drives folks to be interested in pursuing cyber and other STEM education opportunities, looking into the future and things like that, to come together. And if we don't do that, I fear that we're going to continue on a path with lots and lots and lots of action, lots and lots of people doing really great things, right? But without a coherent driving focus towards a solution and a hard goal that we set for ourselves, I fear that we're not going to see radical change in order to bring and make the nation safer.
So I know the moonshot, is idea. It's not concrete at this point. But what kind of thing what could that mean?
Well, I think it is about setting a hard goal, right? So there were three things that made the Kennedy's moonshot successful, right? So inspirational leadership, setting a specific, very hard goal, and then getting the sustained funding necessary to bring it off across the board. And those three things are still the necessary ingredients in terms of what would be the cyber moonshot, right? So we have to get inspirational leadership, which, by the way, is critical now, particularly that it can't just be federal leadership. It's got to be basically, all sector leadership, global leadership, in fact, would be wonderful for us to be able to wrap this in. That we have to set ourselves a goal. We talk about making the nation safer in 5 years, or making the nation safe in 5 years would actually be the ideal kind of outcome. And then the commitment to the funding necessary to sustain this as we try and drive it forward in the future. It's going to require a lot of actions across all aspects of the federal government, right? We're going to have to establish incentives for good behaviors, right? To harden data, harden systems and things like that, in order that far outweigh the cost of inaction, right? Which is some of the things that I think we see in many cases. Those sorts of things like that become a critical part of what's got to happen. And so again, the goal is to bring folks together with a common focus and a common purpose that we can rally behind and drive forward with.
So it's hard to talk about foundational problems in cybersecurity without talking about the cybersecurity talent gap, right? And certainly that's got a lot of discussion here at CyberTalks. How do you think the organizations you deal with ought to be approaching that?
So a couple things on that. One, if I can go kind of back a little bit, the talent gap is real, don't get me wrong, and it's a very difficult problem to address and solve because it's simply the velocity and nature of the problem, which we'll talk about in a second. But I also think that the way we actually do cyber is a principal contributor to the fact that we have this huge talent gap today. So the approach to cyber is an every man for themselves philosophy, right? So every organization has to have their own CISO, has to have their own security team, has to have their own SOC, has to have their own pieces, right, to make this work. And then everybody's competing for the same talent pool, which is not big enough in order to sustain all these things. And then what happens is we wind up with cyber haves and cyber have-nots, right? So those that can afford to pay for the talent and attract the talent and bring them on board can build themselves up, right? And those that can't are going to languish behind. But the problem is that we are in this highly interconnected world where it's the weakest link that matters, right? And so just go down the list of attacks that have occurred, all because somebody else was the weakest link, not necessarily the victim themselves, the direct victim, but the people they work with, subcontractors, you name it. It's the weakest link phenomenon, which of course is only going to get worse in this IoT world, right? So the way we approach cyber, I think, exacerbates the problem of talent, right? we have to stop thinking about cybersecurity and IT as separate silos, okay? And we have to find a way to bring them together, and we need to bring that together through our education system so that we can expand the talent pool itself, right? And look to talent in many, many other areas across the board, right? And if we can bring them together, then people can decide areas of concentration about writing secure code over on one end versus being the cyber guy who then wants to inspect code on the other end of the equation. Both have to have an understanding of what it takes to accomplish what's going to happen, you know, in the middle here. The other one is that we have to find ways to deal with the velocity of the cyber threat problem, right? The fact is that it's the fastest moving technology space that's out there. Our ability to continuously educate a cyber workforce is getting harder and harder and harder to do, right? And so somehow or another, we're going to have to look at our educational processes and realize that it's not necessarily always needed to have a 4-year education to become a cyber expert in something, right? And this is where already happening. You have many, Northern Virginia Community College has a whole cyber program. You're seeing this begin to occur where you can get cyber specialization at different levels across the board, everything from the people that are basically your day-to-day SOC folks that are responsible for ensuring things run well and operate, all the way to the people who are now writing machine learning and AI code and things like that that are focused on the cyber problem. Different skill sets, different educational tracks, all of which are essential to accomplishing this thing. And it's that variety of educational tracks that allow us to do this, and an educational track that allows people to re-enter into that track at any point in time in their career to get cyber training, cyber skills, and then ultimately move themselves into becoming helping to drive the cyber solution.
So that question kind of definitely necessitates a big picture approach, right? And one of the running threads here at CyberTalks is that you don't want to be finally giving the necessary attention to cybersecurity when you're standing over a pile of smoldering rubble, right?
Yeah, right.
You want to do this beforehand. So with the organizations you're dealing with, how can they be more proactive than reactive?
Yes, so in fact, we argue very strongly that we have to adopt 5 basically proactive activities that we're going to push us forward into the space. So along with basic hygiene, which everybody's got to do, and many people need to do better, you know, regardless of whether you're in the government space or your private sector space or across the board, basic hygiene is absolutely essential, but it's an insufficient outcome, right? Because hygiene is itself a reactive, lagging outcome based upon discovered vulnerabilities, right? Okay. What we really need to step into is things like proactive defense. So aggressively go out and constantly hunt on your network, do red teaming all the time, do continuous vulnerability probing and analysis of your environment, and do that to yourself all the time. Think of Netflix, right, does Chaos Monkey in the Amazon cloud as an example of this, right? What they wanted to discover was that their systems could keep on running in the event of some unexpected occurrence, right? So we need to approach, I think, cyber in a similar way, that we are going to go in and create what could be considered to be the Chaos Monkey for cyber, where you can probe yourself, test your systems, test your defenses, drive in some unexpected outcomes, and see what happens, because I'm going to talk in a second about how you get to cyber resilience. So proactive defense is all about getting us ahead of that game. The second thing that's really, really, really important is that we've got to drive ourselves into data center security, and that was talked about several times here today, which I'm really heartened to hear, because it really is about hardening the data, right? We know that our adversaries want one of two things, or oftentimes both things, right? They want our data, right? They want to steal it, they want to deny it, they want to destroy it, they want to modify it, right? And they also want control, right? That's what APTs are about, long dwell persistence in a network where, like the invasion of the Ukraine, right, that took place, where they took down power grids and things like that as a part of that thing. So long dwell persistence where I can then use it to act in my best interest when I feel it's necessary, right? And that's what your adversaries want inside the space. And so what we have to do is realize that those two things exist, and in the case of the data, how do we harden data, right? We know how to do this. We've known a long time how to do this. Encryption, tokenization, right? We now even have blockchain, which would promise really strong data integrity across the board so that we know if somebody's trying to manipulate the data and can discover any modifications that take place. All these are capabilities we can bring to bear so that we don't and can avoid a future data loss event across the board. So that's the hardening of the data, right?
Yeah.
Get to the cloud. You know me, my background, I've talked about this a lot in my past life, but the cloud is more secure at the basic level than almost anything anybody's going to do inside of their own data center environments. But what's really about the cloud is actually a powerful security play that by taking what are these emergent, nascent properties of the cloud and using them as a cybersecurity advantage. And this is really elasticity and software-defined networking as the primary vectors for this, right? So in the case of elasticity, when you fire up workloads to extend, to grow capacity and shrink capacity, as long as you're firing up your workload out of a container, out of a clean vault that you have high confidence has been unaffected or unhooked by your adversary, I'm always running clean workloads in and out, right? Use software-defined networking to hide my network pathways and then put them both together to constantly shuffle your workloads around so you become a moving target, right? A moving target is really hard to hit, right? And do those things. And then finally, it's about driving to cyber resilience, all right? And cyber resilience is all about stopping trying to think of cyber as we have to prevent all events, and look at it as how we're going to design our systems to take a hit and keep on going, right? And so this again is where things like elasticity and software network come into play. If I discover a malware event on my network, I want to be able to instantaneously carve out that network segment through software-defined networking, fire up new instances from my clean containers someplace else in the cloud and keep on running, while then I can do my triage and figure out what happened and do my after action reports and all the things you want to be able to do, right? And it's all those things together that are going to change the game for us, okay, organizationally and things like that, okay?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
okay.
and thank you for watching. Check out more on cyberscoop.com.